Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I'm joined by the amazing SoCal Leatherface. SoCal, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am doing much better now, man. I'm super excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here.
But before we talk about why you're here, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You created your cosplay persona back in 2018 to pay homage to your favorite horror movie, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Um, You started with a cheap Trick or Treat Studios mask and a dishwashing apron, and built upon that over the years. So I got to know, like, what gave you the push and the drive to be like, you know what, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna become SoCal Leatherface.
That's a great question. I really actually started interest in cosplay with the anime community, and I saw that there were a lot of great characters. And as my interests kind of shifted, priorities shifted, I drew more to the horror community. And as you'd said, I've loved Texas Chainsaw Massacre, most of my life. It's become my favorite horror movie, and it's something that I grew really, really deeply attached to as a movie, and specifically Leatherface as a character. I felt that he was not really a very popular character, because everyone wants to be Freddy or Jason or Michael, and that's cool. That's great. Um, I felt that Leatherface was actually scarier than all of them because he was like a real guy. And as anyone who's got a depth of history knowledge of history in the movie knows, it's based on characters like Ed Gein, real people that actually killed people. And so I think that reference to real events makes him that much scarier of a character, and to me that's why I wanted to play him so much.
And I can completely understand that. I think Leatherface is on a lot of people's Mount Rushmore, but you're right. The big three will always be, for at least for our generation, Jason, Freddie, Michael. That's
Right.
the big three for a lot of people in our generation. So, you do a lot of cons and stuff like that. How many cons would you say you do a year?
Oh gosh. In terms of formal conventions, I would say probably in the realm of 3 to 4. But I also love going to the really smaller events throughout the year as well. And there's probably at least another dozen or so throughout the year that I will go to. Shops like Roast the Dead Coffee in Yucaipa, Arts Sideshow in Montclair, Toy Depot over in Northgate. There's a bunch of different places that are just really, really wonderful, that are more small time but throw their own kind of small events for the locals. And I really enjoy going because you get a mix of different people because it's spread out through all of Southern California.
And like you said, it's a lot more private, a lot more intimate. You really get to have much more one-on-one time with a lot of people that are there rather than walking around a huge gala the whole time.
Absolutely, because it's not uncommon for cosplayers at these bigger events to actually get lines of people where
Right.
they will actually line up to take pictures with these characters that are cosplaying there at the conventions. And with these smaller events, you can actually kind of stop and talk to people a little bit and actually get to learn about them and what their interests are in horror and why they actually love coming to events as well. And it really, to me, I feel that builds a really strong community. That way we can kind of know and share what each other likes.
Right. Man, and that's amazing. I love the fact that you get to do these type of things. And I do have all of SoCal's social media links down in the description. So make sure you're following to stay up to date on everything that he's doing. And maybe eventually you guys can run into each other at a con yourselves. So maybe be able to say, hey, I seen you on Sledgehammer Horror, and he'd be like, rock on, that's what I'm hoping for. So in order for you to be this much into Leatherface, and in order for you to have such a love of the genre and doing all the cons, horror had to start for you somewhere. So now,
Right.
SoCal, I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And this may be a surprise to some people, but your first horror movie was
It was Silence of the Lambs. And
Tricky Guys.
yeah, and you might notice a little bit of a theme similarity between them with the cannibalism thing. And it's funny that that actually has kind of become not really a favorite trope for me for horror, but it's always been one that's been very interesting just because of how different it is and how some cultures actually do practice it for spiritual purposes, but at the same time, others perform it as an act of anger or vengeance. And it has such a broad spectrum of what it means to people. But with Silence of the Lambs, it was one of my absolute favorite early horror movies, and it was definitely the first one that I remember seeing growing up. And it was something that I was not supposed to see, just because of I was a kid at the time that I saw it. But it really stuck with me, the performance of all the different actors that were in that movie and how truly profound it is as a movie. And even to this day, it stands strong as one of the best horror movies out there.
Oh, absolutely. It's iconic. Like it really is iconic, and it's iconic to the point to where it was winning awards. That doesn't happen in horror, and that's why it doesn't really get the horror label a lot. Because people are like, oh, well, it won awards at the Academy. Don't give me that bullshit. It's still a horror
Yeah.
movie. So we know you were quite young the first time that you had seen it, and you said that were you actually with your parents, or were you kind of like behind the scenes and they didn't know you were watching it?
They actually were not aware that I was watching it. My dad was watching it. He was on the couch. He thought I was in the other room playing with toys, and I was listening to the dialogue to the movie. And as anyone who's seen it can tell you, there's not a whole lot of fast-paced action in that movie. There's a lot of dialogue, but it was the dialogue itself that drew me into the movie, and just that conversation that Clarice was having with Hannibal Lecter about the head that was found in the car that was in the storage unit. That it weirded me out because I was like, why would there be a head in a car? Why would there be, X, Y, and Z? And
Right.
it really made me curious. So I kind of snuck into the room and I watched it and I watched it and I watched pretty much from that point on, which is, at least half the movie. And I was able to find it on TV again at some point and was able to watch the whole movie in its entirety. And it really stuck with me as far as this is a different kind of movie. This isn't a cartoon. This isn't a
Right.
comedy. It's a different kind of movie. And that thought process just always stuck with me. And to this day, that's why horror is my absolute favorite genre in terms of movies.
And it's funny because, like you said, this isn't fast paced. This isn't something that you're going to go into, ready balls to the wall. But it's still one of those movies that is so character driven that it does keep you on the
Absolutely.
edge of your seat for the whole time. What?
Absolutely. And I really want to like kind of highlight that this movie is actually what saved Anthony Hopkins' career as a screen actor because he was ready to throw in the towel. He was ready to go back to England, go back to being a stage actor, just completely forget doing any kind of movies ever again because he wasn't having a whole lot of luck. And
Right.
with this role, it actually threw him headfirst into the limelight and really blew him up as a character because of his portrayal of Hannibal Lecter.
And he's become, synonymous with Hannibal Lecter. He wasn't the first person to play Hannibal Lecter on screen,
Right,
but he has
right,
become synonymous with the character. So,
right.
do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most from the film?
Oh gosh, you know what? There's so many scenes within that movie. I know we had a conversation about this, and there's just so many, but I would really have to say that within the movie itself, just the idea of someone taking skin and making a bodysuit out of the movie or out of the characters really kind of stuck with me as just a wild idea because you think about the concept of someone um, creating a suit out of actual skin is something that just it does not occur to your normal thought process, and it was
Right.
so out there and so wild that it's definitely one of those scenes that stuck with me through that movie. And there were several others that really stuck with me, but that's definitely one of the top ones that
Right. But you even
is
have it
really
go even
creepy.
farther, like when he's in the ambulance and he sits up and takes the face off, and you
Yeah,
realize that
yeah,
he's made it out.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
'cause just
And
before that,
definitely
we have, in
that's
my opinion, one of the scariest movies or one of the scariest scenes in the movie when you have the cop that's got almost crucified up
right,
on the fence. And then you see
right,
that Hannibal
right,
actually made it out. He's in the ambulance, like he's not the one that died in the elevator shaft. So
right,
this
right.
movie is just a great way to subvert expectations and scare you throughout the film. And it's a film that, like I said, it is like a cultural icon almost, but I feel like in the horror community, it's still an underrated film because a lot of people
Yes.
classify it as a thriller or a police
Right.
procedural, something like that. When really this to me is just a horror film. Like it is just genuinely scary and unsettling, and there's so many moments throughout the movie that just leave you feeling icked or just
Right.
legit scared out of your fucking mind. So
Right.
we know which scene affected you the most, but what would you say your favorite scene from the film is?
Oh man, there are really so many. There's really I can't really pick one particular scene at the moment because I actually went and rewatched it probably about 2 or 3 days ago because I wanted to really kind of just soak it in again because it had been probably a couple months since I'd watched it. And I want to say that probably one of my new favorite parts is actually the very, very end where he's on the phone and he actually talks to Clarice and he actually gets her on the phone and she realizes, hey, this is actually him calling her. And in a way, he still kind of cares about her, but at the same time, he's kind of giving her little tidbits that, hey, I'm still out there and I'm still doing my thing. And then as the camera pans back and shows the director of the psych facility who basically ran away out of fear because Hannibal Lecter escaped. I think that's one of the most eerie, kind of creepy scenes because you can really start to try and use your imagination and be like, okay, the credits are rolling. It's not going to show what's going to happen. So what do you imagine is going to be the next part of that?
Right. Well, and another big part of that too is, when he gives I'm having an old friend for dinner,
Yes.
and it's
Yeah.
just like, again, you're scared shitless at that moment because, that he's about to eat a human being. He's
Right.
going right back to how he used to be. So, um,
Absolutely.
we know which scene affected you the most, and we know what your favorite scene from the film is. But, we talk often about with these movies, remakes, requels, sequels. It's kind of all the rage now. Is this a
Right.
movie that you would like to see them remake today?
Honestly, no. I feel like it was shot within an era that really played well into kind of the social expectations of audiences. And to me, I would dare to make a comparison with the movie The Exorcist. When that movie came out in the 70s and it was full of religious terror and dogma that just really freaked everybody out. I think in terms of the decade that it was in, it sank really, really well into when it came out. I think it came out at a really great time to really mess with people. Because nowadays we have all these, gore porn movies. We've got the Saw movies, we've got Hostel, we've got all these wild movies that are always trying to shock you and throw more gore at you and all that. And I feel like if we were to remake Silence of the Lambs, that's the direction it would go. But I feel like it would actually detract from
Yeah.
the atmospheric feel of Silence of the Lambs because I would consider that Silence of the Lambs, the way it was shot, is actually very similar to a lot of the Ari Aster movies.
Oh,
Midsummer.
I was gonna say it's totally an
Yeah,
art film rather
right.
than you're like a slasher gore fest. It really is like I also feel that way about the original Texas Chainsaw though. So I've always
Yes,
said that if the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre was shot and filmed today, it would be an A24 film.
right,
I didn't think the original, as this franchise goes, it becomes more of a slasher. The
right,
original to me is kind of like an artsy home invasion movie.
right.
It's still a horror
Exactly.
movie, but it's not a slasher in my eyes.
Right.
And I do feel that way for Silence of the Lambs as well. I feel like it is an artsy film that if it came out today would probably be an A24 type film.
Definitely, definitely. I think that's a great way to look at it because I feel that, especially with how A24 has been spinning their movies, they've been very patient, and I feel like that's something that's kind of been lost in a lot of horror movies nowadays. Is there's a lack of patience, and you can see that in a lot of authors as well because you can see authors like Stephen King, who's been writing for literally decades, and his movies, or well, his books specifically are not fast books. They are a slow burn. They spread out the plot. They make sure that there's little details seeded throughout the plot. And I feel that with movies like Texas Chainsaw, movies like Silence of the Lambs, I feel like those movies especially play into that similar kind of pace just because we can go balls to the wall, we can go gory, we can go slasher type, and really kind of just make it that, that gore fest. And I think that that's why for Texas Chainsaw 2, Toby Hooper actually kind of went that direction a little bit more while also playing into the 80s tropes and the stereotypes and making it a much more of a comedy kind of movie, because that's how we originally saw the first Texas Chainsaw. He saw it as a comedy. I don't remember his full logic and reasoning for that, but that was such a wild statement that stuck with a lot of people. It's like, how can you see Texas Chainsaw as a comedy? Well,
Right.
if you look at it as almost as a twisted family drama, yeah, it's actually a comedy.
I can see that too. Um, so usually I ask at this point, usually my little buddy Ghostface comes out and asks what your favorite scary movie is, but we've already talked about that a little bit. So we know that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the one for you. So I gotta know
Right.
what is it about Texas Chainsaw that is so special to you?
What's special about Texas Chainsaw to me is that it utilizes a sense of foreboding, an ominous feel to it, purely through the cinematography, without any heavy use of blood or gore or anything like that. Now that's not to deny the set pieces they have. Obviously, there's the bones, there's the meat that's on the table, all of these atmospheric bits, but it's not blood flying into your face or
Right.
anything like that. The most blood that we see in the movie is when the hitchhiker cuts his hand, and at the very end when Sally is just covered in blood. Yeah, exactly. And those are the, I would consider, the goriest scenes,
Mhm.
because you can create a horrifying atmosphere without making it super gory. And I think that the primo scene, I always bring this up whenever I get a chance. The scene at the dinner table where Sally is tied to the chair and they're all leering at her and jeering at her and just tormenting her, and the way the camera just moves in and gets right up into her eyes, and you can literally see the tears in her eyes, you can hear the screaming, and it's like, holy crap, this is,
Oh yeah.
if you didn't know it was a movie, you would think it was real.
Hmm.
And I feel that with it being able to pull that off without having to resort to too much gore or anything like that, to me that comes off as a very skillful way of telling a story, of shooting a movie. And to me, that's
Absolutely.
why it's really, really special to me, because it doesn't need these extra parts. Not to say that they're not good or fun or special, but to be able to pull it off, to pull off a story about, teenagers being killed and eaten by cannibals in rural Texas, and being able to do such a gory theme without much gore, to me really speaks of how skillfully it was shot.
Absolutely. So I've had an amazing time, SoCal, talking to you about, your first horror movie, your favorite horror movie, and what these movies mean to you. But before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question. We're going to go back to Silence of the Lambs, and what we're going to do is rank this movie on a skull count. Now,
Sure.
we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. We're not being critics. What we're doing is ranking this movie on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So, zero skulls being the least effective, five being the most effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle.
Sure.
So, Cal, what would your ranking of Silence of the Lambs be?
I would have to give it a very solid 4 star, four skulls, just because it's a profoundly effective movie. But at the time that I saw it, I also didn't fully comprehend some of the themes that were within the movie, like how Buffalo Bill used the fake cast to lure the
Mhm.
girl to help him get the couch into the van. I didn't realize that that was actually based off of how things like people like Ted Bundy, he
Yeah,
did similar things to lure victims. And to me, that a little bit of those finer touches were actually kind of lost on me. So that's why I give it a 4 and not a 5.
sure.
But at the same time, I feel that it still was able to communicate truly impactful concepts dealing with things like, obviously murder, cannibalism, things like, removing people's skin, and the analogies used, especially with the presence of the moths, as well as, other various little topics throughout the movie. And I feel like it was a really strong way of communicating those without
Yeah.
too much requirement for background knowledge.
Sure. Yeah, it wasn't too heavy-handed. So
Right.
I know I said it at the beginning, guys, but we are at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, I do have all of SoCal's links down in the description. So make sure that you're clicking those and following him on social media. SoCal, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
Um, Everyone else, if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help build the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. Our links are down in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.